but it's a lot about individuals too. I think hiring the right people, like the best creatives are the ones that come up with the best ideas.
And then the creator space is just understanding the impact that creators make.
I think in a lot of ways, content's getting commoditized by all the rules and best practices.
You just kind of see where habits are and fill that habit. Because at the end of the day, our jobs are to find the audience.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Radical Content. Eric Gray, and I've got another guest interview podcast today, and I'm super excited about Mike Aransky. He right now is the creative director at Gray, New York, an awesome agency doing really cool stuff. We're going to talk a lot about it. But Mike, I love your background. I'm not going to list it all, but Red Bull, IGN, 100 Thieves. Like, we talk to a lot of people that are, in the brand storytelling world or in the social brand world. You kind of intersect with a lot of that, but you have a tremendous background in media and new media, and you bring all that to the table. So I'm excited for today's chat. I think it's going to be really fun. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, no, I appreciate it, man. Thank you for the invite.
All right, so let me just kind of do a little bit of a level set for you and give you a chance to kind of set up. How did this all start? Obviously, creative director today, everybody has their different pathways and journeys, but you've done it with some really cool brands in different ways. Where did you catch the bug for kind of this digital content and really understanding how to create content both for brands, but also I think you have a significant expertise in doing it in a way that matters to kind of this younger generation. But where did that all start?
Good question. It's got a long line. It goes back close to 20 years. Basically, long story short, my career was all about building content, but at that time it was of being a filmmaker, an independent filmmaker, and digital was making the transition from film. So we honestly, early enough, actually made films and then went into the digital side of space. I also worked at one point in the early part of broadcast, worked at ESPN, and being able to kind of work in that transition as we were working to digital non-linear editing and all that stuff. We were making a lot of those transitions along that way. And then basically the big capper that got us there was an opportunity to go become a producer editor. Is one of the first producer editors actually over at NBC Digital Studios at 30 Rockefeller in New York City. We were literally hired as a team to build content for branded content, but also viral content. That was actually kind of what we were hired for originally.
Your job is a weird
thing.
Make viral content.
Yeah, make hits. Can you just do that? So no, it's a long story because NBC had that whole, I don't know if you guys are aware of like Lonely Island. They had this thing called Lazy Sunday. Yeah. That was a big thing that kind of became their push for like, hey, we need to go double up on this whole thing because YouTube's starting to blow up and we need to build a team to do that. And we became the digital team that scaled from that point on. There was a couple of pit stops into like normal broadcast world, but for the most part, it was like there. We broke off into a team called Black 20. We did that for 3.5 years. A chunk of the company got acquired by Fox at the end of it. It was unfortunately down during the time of the recession, so things lasted very short because digital media was like too early at that point. We were like the head-to-head competitor with a company called College Humor, which is now known as Dropout to the kids. And
I didn't know the College Humor got a rebrand.
Dropout, which is great. I mean, it's good stuff. And Sam's really smart about how they're handling this new execution on what they're doing with it. But check it out for sure. That's a hashtag ad for Sam. But then anyway, long story short, went back, got reset in my life, family, all the fun stuff, and then had an opportunity to go work for IGN back in the digital space again, became a senior producer with them, worked up to like the senior manager in development, basically us coming up with new content, working with brands, which again was another part because at the time NBC pivoted from the viral content to like halfway through was like, all right, we're gonna do branded content. And that's basically, we became that team. So that became my line over at IGN, digital side of the world, did a whole bunch over there, and then rolled out to 100 Thieves, which is a esports gaming lifestyle brand that you might be familiar with. That was great. I came actually on the early ground with that team, became their head of content. We built an entire ecosystem around content. We got really big. We had like a team that was probably 30 deep or more at that point, but we were really leaning really hard on the digital media and expanding off that space. And I kind of threaded between our main channel and started moving towards more direct esports content and blowing out our teams that side, and did that for about 3.5 years, and then got a chance to work for Red Bull. Gaming side, digital side, worked with them for about 2.5 years, building a bunch of different events and content around there. We did a game show that was an interactive game show called New Game. We did Ludwig streamer games, if anyone's familiar with that in the streaming space. A lot of deep dives into digital land. And then obviously the opportunity came to come work for Gray New York. Now I work with Gray New York and our client being Las Vegas, working around coming up with original pillars of content through that drive.
Well, it was a great 2-minute download of your LinkedIn
I was like,
resume.
dump it all on you, folks.
There's so much to get in on that. And obviously, like, being in kind of the brand content space for most of my career, I was in sports radio first. So I have a little bit of a publishing kind of broadcasting background before I got it so comfortable on microphone and doing this before I got into the brand side of things. But I love talking to people that have kind of a textured background, especially one that comes from media. And so the first thing I wanted to talk about and ask you about was, what are the things that you take from kind of the traditional media side of the world, or even the content creator media side of the world, and apply to now in kind of a role where you're doing a lot of brand storytelling?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot. I mean, traditional is fine. I think there are components of traditional that help here. Creator space is obviously kind of the more where we go deep down that line more at this point. I've worked a lot with creators of the years. Obviously, 100 Thieves was Nade Shot, and we with Lud and all the other creators we had underneath our barrier at Red Bull, and even worked with talent when we had our IGN side of the world and whatnot. It's long lane of that of creator space. But a big part of it for me is learning the traditional side of things, transitioning to the digital. Luckily, I had a hand in being on the digital side early, especially with NBC, and understanding like the transitional side of it. I've always been very digital savvy first, not traditional savvy. Not saying I'm not traditional savvy, but like using that as like a bounce board to get me to the digital land of things. So everything that you professionally understand on a traditional line helps you transcend on a digital line to a point. But you also need to understand what does and doesn't work in that space and see how it works, because inevitably the digital space is in a constant changing flux. What works one week doesn't work the other week. It's kind of being able to be responsive and understanding of what works in the digital space to kind of elevate that content and what you're trying to deliver for it. Because so obvious note here is like, digital space content is a lot more authentic. It feels more real, it feels more grounded, where, traditional is more polished and yada, yada. And it's interesting, if you take that polish from traditional and try to transcend it over to digital, it's not a one-to-one. And usually it hurts your content feed in the pipeline. So It's very much an interesting balancing act of seeing those play out. And then the creator space is just understanding that part of like the impact that creators make towards content and how that elevates it. Their community is a really important asset that kind of elevates that content, and knowing what their community is looking for is also key to that. So I think that's something to always be aware of when you're looking at from a creator and a traditional side of things.
Yeah, I think the thing that's interesting that you brought up, and I think about it a lot when you think about media versus brand and marketing, is this idea of community or audience. 100 Thieves is so focused on who the audience they're trying to build with. They've got to create value for them to come back. And brands don't oftentimes have that always on their mind. They have the thing about what can we push on people rather than what movement are we trying to create, or what community are we trying to be a part of. And that's what I think about a lot when I think about the difference between like a publishing world and a brand marketing world.
And that's a good way of looking at it too. I mean, look, the good thing is like the client, our team that we work with in Las Vegas really gets it. They truly understand that digital space, which is great because we can communicate a lot of stuff. Like we're trying to grow a feed for them with YouTube, and everyone awares that if you build a YouTube content pipeline, it's a very slow pipeline in comparison to any social platform, frankly, out there. And so it's like stuff like that, where that understanding has helped transcend a lot of what we do here. And I think it helps elevate where we get to. But you're right. I've had clients that just don't get that part of it. And they just want to be like, I want them drinking, eating some product, 10 times within the next 22 minutes because our database says we need to make sure that that's visually referenced in those lines. It's tricky, right? But you also want to make sure that you're doing it in a way that doesn't feel forced on that audience. We found that balancing act a lot. Red Bull is a great brand that we worked with by doing that stuff, because it was something that it doesn't feel forced, because it feels like they're complimenting the creator. And I think that's an important part of what we do when trying to make sponsor branded content. I think it's really important.
So I'm guessing you spent some days on the floor of E3 at IGN.
Yeah, just a bit. We definitely did. We actually created, funny enough, a big part of what we did was a thing called IGN Access, which was at the time.
I know it.
It was like pre experience of the floor of E3 before social became everywhere. We were basically like, if you want the full experience of E3, IGN gives you that front door access. And
so IGN Access is what I used as a case study to build out my team at EA Sports.
No
and
way.
We had 20 people in 2008 on the floor of E3 at the Electronic Arts area.
Yeah.
We were doing developer interviews before everybody was doing it. We were doing live streams of games that people had not seen before. we were like looking at the retention of YouTube and saying people don't want to see developers. They want to see the raw capture of the gameplay they haven't seen before. So we were optimizing in real time. And here's a funny story. I bet you have a bunch of funny E3 stories. So I want to hear one of them. We were at the Electronic Arts big announcement. So that's at a separate theater from what the actual floor of the E3. So it was one of the theaters in LA. And Peter Moore was up there doing his big announcements. And we set up this like janky, like webcam experience with a bunch of like former radio content guys just trying to figure it out. Mm-hmm. And I did the interview. My guys did the production. So there was only like three of us. It was janky. I like to say that in those early days, I learned a lot from failing a lot, right?
Yeah, that's exactly the case. You just got to go throw yourself out there, man. That's all it comes down to.
And so we did this great interview. I thought I nailed it. I come back and my buddy, who was a friend of mine who I hired at EA, I was like, how did it go? And he goes, it didn't go out. And I was like, you have to be kidding me. We had like 3,000 people in line saying, when does this start? There was no backup. It literally just never existed. And we just packed up and just hoped that no one would tap us on the shoulder and say, hey guys, the job is over. This is not a real thing. So that's my crazy E3 story.
That's insane.
But what was something that you, from a content experience, had to have happen at E3?
I mean, it was always like the balancing act of getting on the. I mean, the thing is, E3 was not tiny. It was definitely like you were a run and gun team, much like you mentioned. So we ran and gun a lot across the floors, and we, it would be like one project to on one giant area to the other, and you got like 5 minutes to make that run. You got to like track down Kojima before it's too late. It's got to be able to, get the moment of getting people's reactions to the stuff. We did a lot of we did a thing with Keith Apicary or what's his name? But anyway, it was like a talent that was like at the time in the gaming space was like kind of like more of a comedy talent. We used that as like we did a whole like wrap of E3 music video thing where we traveled the floor and did a whole thing showing off that. That was a great way to celebrate. Hey, we got through the end of this nightmare because it was so crazy. E3 was great. Like it's a weird thing to be like, oh, back in the days of E3 because it doesn't truly exist anymore.
I know it's gone. It's so weird,
dude. Like as a weird line, and this is a weird side actually. Like my whole career is kind of based on the idea that I just wanted to get to E3 because it was as a fandom, someone in the younger side of things. You couldn't get access unless you were in the industry. That was like a big thing. Me and my buddy, after I left ESPN, we went and opened up a gaming shop for 3.5 years. A brick and mortar shop, literally, because I'm on the bed of like I wanted to get the enter card to go into E3, and so years later, obviously, I got to go work for IGN and do that as like an every year kind of thing. But at the time, like, oh boy,
that's fun.
Yeah.
Let me jump quickly to Red Bull. Red Bull is one of those brands that many brand storytellers like froth at the mouth. Like, oh, could you imagine if we were a brand that cared so much about storytelling and emotionally connecting like Red Bull does? Now, Red Bull's invest millions and millions of dollars in content and sponsorships, and most businesses don't even understand the scale of them as a media company. But what was something that you learned and you took from that Red Bull period that you maybe even use today?
I mean, look, Red Bull as a brand, it's fascinating as a brand. Like it is, media is not just like a side idea at Red Bull. Red Bull's media is like the 50% vertical or maybe more. I would even say more at this point. Like it is very interesting, like I was in the game side of things with Red Bull, and we still do, they've kind of pivoted a lot differently than how they were before with it, but at the same time, still positively, they're still doing a lot of great events and stuff around that. But what's really obviously the key to Red Bull is their, like, I have to call it, they don't like to call it this, but stunt activations. Yeah. But you've got your planet jump, you've got your down the massive ramp, you got the trade-off for two planes kind of concept. It's like things that basically get media attention are kind of their bread and butter. And that to me is kind of it was an interesting balancing act of me working there as from a gaming standpoint, because gaming, you can't really pull that move off as much. They're finding new unique ways to get there. But it's a kind of a long game and trying to find with the media, the gaming version, how that connects to the extreme sports of it. But it was fascinating to work with like a bunch of different teams that like, there was a team that's like just skateboards and was team just surf. And the other team was like off-road cars and an F1 and you name it. Like everybody had a vertical that they were covering that was like a brand image of Red Bull. And again, Red Bull was always never about forcing the brand on people. It was about being like the brand that's supporting these crazy things that are happening, or the events that are, supporting gamers in a unique way and stuff like that. So that was the part that honestly was sexy to me, was getting on board with Red Bull, was a brand that was willing to take shots, because it's, it is kind of, as you mentioned, there's an interesting balancing act with brands and getting willing to take the jump.
I think that's the nugget, right? Is like, when brands can be bold enough to be willing to take jumps. And sometimes it means to take jumps that aren't going to work. And the hope is that you have enough at bats that you will find some of those that actually produce. So now you're transitioning, and what you're doing at Gray, and it's what a little bit of what I did for a long time at Universal Parks and Resorts. It was trying to inspire and get people to think about vacation at a theme park. You're doing it for a whole destination.
Correct.
And one of the things, I follow Bryce Betts, and so we got to get you on the show. I keep stalking him. He said he'll come on. He's messaged me and he's like, dude, let's do it. And then he ghosts us. So we gotta fix that, Mike. You gotta help us out.
Sure, that's fine. We'll mention it.
1.7 million followers on Instagram, like one of the most followed travel, social handle out there. What are y'all doing different? Gray and Vegas kind of collectively together. What are y'all doing different tactically, philosophically, that you feel like is made this thing kind of explode?
Yeah, I mean, look, Bryce he's a rock star. He's great. He is. It's such an interesting balancing act with us, because us being Gray, we're supporting them, but we also cover like the bigger, wider image part of it. Sure. Like, he is very much like, they're in the team in the weeds. They show off, they get all the sphere content, they get all the firework content, they get all the content that showcases the moments and the breadth of Vegas on a day-to-day. That honestly, like, from a standpoint of you want to basically building FOMO to missing out this experience of Vegas. What's interesting about it is, I think a lot of times people, when they think Vegas, they always consider like, there's always the idea of like the Vegas that we know, which is like, gambling and nightlife and whatnot. And there's a lot of that stuff there. But what's great about what they're doing is they're showcasing everything that you can truly experience there. And I think that's the part that's kind of, like you mentioned, you worked at Universal. I'm a giant Universal, and I'm like literally 5 minutes away from Hollywood, and then
awesome.
Universal. And Disney, I'm like a hardcore Disney Parks fan.
Stop it! Shut up! Take that back. I won't hear it.
Yeah. The ticket room sign in the back doesn't give any of that away. That's kind of the part of it to me that was exciting, because Bryce and I have to share that connection where we understand that part of the space, and really kind of what we think we can elevate in that space, because it's the goal is to, Vegas is such a big entity. It's the giant theme park. It's the adult theme park. It's it's a world in which you growing into Gen Z and experiencing Vegas in a whole new way than it used to be experienced before, is what he and the team and myself and our crew all bringing to the table, that are kind of bringing that experience and showcasing those things in different ways. And so we've done that, where we try to elevate our parts and things of, like, we try to elevate, like F1, great example. We do things like a custom shoey drops. We do these giant chips that are custom designed for all the F1 drivers, that showcases Vegas, but also showcases F1 and the connection between the two. It's like, we do a crazy line dance activation takeover for Beyonce's concert that weekend. All the fans are there. Let's do something rad that no one else would do. And you can do that in Vegas. And that's the kind of stuff you can elevate. And WrestleMania is a great example. We also put Triple H on top of like Allegiant Stadium and did wild stuff like that. Lots of crazy stuff already being built out for this year. But basically, it's like in the Red Bull conversation of things, it's doing some things that are elevating the brand, but not in a way that feels like forced, but almost like you want to be more a part of that. Which is like, look, if you were Universal, I know that, because it's like an experience where I want to watch all the videos and see what's happening, like at Epic Universe and stuff like that. But like things that I can't go to yet, because that's all on the other side of the map for me. But I get excited. Or the Fast and Furious drop that just happened over at Hollywood Universal. Like, I want to see all that stuff. And I follow a lot of creators that do that stuff. But the brand becoming the creator is kind of the next level step. And I think that's the part that I think is exciting that Vegas is doing, and giving it that kind of point of view. And then again, that's what we're also taking that and elevating it to our YouTube channels and whatever that we're doing now too. So,
well, dude, first off, like, that is so hard. Like, it's easy to, that sounds like a great like buzzword or like line for a social media talk, the brand becoming the creator. Mm-hmm. But it means something, but it is so hard to try to make that transition, not just internally. There's a lot of people that you have to get on board, but just from a creative and storytelling standpoint. And there's two things that I feel like are like tenets for what I see for what you and Bryce and the team are doing. One is you're creating storytelling made for social about Las Vegas. Right? It really feels social first, everything. And that's kind of this idea of the brand becoming the creator. Yeah. The other one that I want to talk about is you guys are telling so many stories. You're creating so much content, and the team talks about 500 posts, this million impressions, right? And so there's a scale of content creation that most people would lose their mind at. And I tell people all the time, and I think the first person I heard say this was the former CMO for Marriott. Tapone was her last name. I forget her first name, but she talked about how I want to be in the business of having hundreds of stories to tell because that is where the economy is going. And now we have that ability to create and to publish. It doesn't mean that the content can be garbage content. It still has to be super, super good. Yeah. So for the person that comes on and is like, yeah, what you guys are doing is great, but it sounds like a fairy tale, creating 500 pieces of content in a weekend. How the hell do you do that?
Is that the F1 talk? Yeah, that sounds about right. But like, you speak of E3, you know how this works, right? Like the world was, you wanted to give, I mean, that's the best way I always wrap my brain around it, right? With F1, like we worked together with Bryce. We had our team and his team. We came together. We built an entire index of like all the things we're going to do. F1 takes over Vegas that week. And so you can scale pretty hard because it's basically, and you talk E3, that was like an E3 for the entire week, but it's just getting built up to that weekend where it gets exciting. And you're trying to showcase every possible thing you can to kind of build that FOMO experience. And like F1 is, it's tough because it's like not a lot of people can get to F1. But at the same time, it's also an experience that you're like, next year when F1 hits, now seeing everything there's a lot of things that can fall into my pipeline that I find to be really exciting. And I want to be a part of more of that too. I will be honest, F1, I was like, I was a Drive to Survive fan, and I got the Red Bull and I kind of got into that experience of it all. But was when I got to go, and truth be told, I didn't get to go to F1 while I was at Red Bull. We'll go figure. But like when I got to work it this year, I got to see it firsthand, that experience, and knowing what that now feels like and that energy that comes with it. There's a lot to be said for that and that experience to showcase all that. You mentioned about the idea, like with the note about the creator and the brand thing is an interesting thing too, because there's so many, I don't know how far back at Universal you were at, but like that world now has expanded to be a lot of creators hitting these places and showcasing these places. And so you kind of are also in competition with them because you're the brand who can now be superseded by creators. And so you have to work with that together.
And the brand can't do the same stuff the creators could do, which is like, we have so many internal limitations, which is very much a challenge.
Yeah, it's a challenge. It is. Yeah. I mean, there ain't no doubt in that mind. And I know Bryce deals with that a lot too, but like, again, our job is to give people an experience that shows that place. Like, and again, the F1 experience is a great thing. It's 500 pieces of videos. You know how much stuff was going on in F1? Like, I don't think we even covered like a quarter. No, I would say we covered a giant chunk of it, but there was still probably some floating around that we probably couldn't even catch because at the end of it all, it's so much happening.
Yeah, but how many content creators are on site between Vegas team and your team?
I think we had 12 on site. We had a pretty cracked team.
And these are long days. These are like 12, 18-hour days, right?
We were doing a lot of like, my job basically was coordinating between these groups and trying to make sure we had a reality in which everyone was still able to activate and still be able to get done. And to be honest, my old note was, because as someone who has been in production a long time, knowing how many hours they are working, so we try to be balanced as possible. But we all know when you get into like the Friday, Saturday, Sundays of those weeks, things get wild. So,
but the end of those days are like, those are where teams are really built, right? When you come off of those days and you're like, man, we did something special. What do you say to like the old school social media professional that's like,
oh, but we can't post more than 6 times a day because the algorithm will.
Yeah,
like that's still real for some people.
Yeah, you got to activate. I mean, the note that I always say, and me and Bryce talk about this all the time, it's like back to the in competition with creators out there. They can get it up before you. If they get up before you, they get the exclusive. Yeah. You need to get up there as fast as possible and beat out that public, because the reality is you're the brand and you can get buried by a lot of other creators who can just go showcase that brand right away. Especially like Sphere coverage is a great example of what we do. A lot of that stuff there that Bryce does on his team. That is like covering that and showcasing that and getting those moments up. Because again, Sphere, really hard to get into. It's, not the cheapest in ticket sometimes. And so inevitably, like us giving you that access is something that's special,
That's so cool. Well, one of the things we like to do here on Radical Content is to really kind of break people's minds about what's possible. And I think you guys are doing that a lot. And so I want to talk about a couple things. The first one is about kind of creative storytelling. I mentioned to my team this phrase, ruthless creativity. And, there's a million ideas that people have out there, and ChatGPT can give us a gazillion more. But I do think there is something that the creator world is finding out, a little bit of what you guys are finding out in Vegas. There's so much average branded content out there, and it drives me insane, right? There is a way to pursue ruthless creativity, and it's hard sometimes. There's an old IDEO thing that they talked about, like, you don't want idea 1, you got to get to idea 42. That's when originality starts to happen, and it's hard to get there. So the question, it's the long setup for the question, which is, how do you come up with great ideas? And I mean it kind of practically and tactically. Are there systems? Is it people? Are there processes? What do you do? How do you guide a team to make sure, because you're the creative director, right? I'm sure stuff comes to you and you're like, that's stupid, we're not doing that. Or you're like, that's great, how did we get there, and how do we make that repeatable?
Sure. There are a lot of flows in that kind of case of it. What's interesting is, like, if you talk to Bryce and myself, again, his dynamics are hitting the floor on the day-to-day. Ours is the build of the bigger packages and the bigger deliveries, and we have a lot of them come in, so we are building across that. So anything you can think of that are the big events that happen in Vegas, we are connected to those things. Like, EDC's coming, and WrestleManias, and F1s, and we're definitely already talking F1 for this year, and we're like many months ahead. We have a lot of processes with that in mind. But what we do, like, for me, like, one of the big things obviously is I follow a lot of creators. I follow a lot of content on social. I am like I basically am a pool of like vertical and digital content at this point, where it's basically my meal of the day. So for me, like, it's really important that I understand the trends and what's happening, what is not happening, avoid things that are causing friction points. But also that's kind of comes in play with why I have also ACDs, and so we can bounce things off. And my creative team as a whole, like, we have a lot of people with different point of views that helps kind of flesh us out into ways to do it. It's really important for me to listen to my team as much as I'm listening to Bryce and his team and where they're going, what works, and looking at that and how we reactionary will turn in our content into that direction. But it's also understanding the space that you're in. As like, you get worried that you don't want to be in the bad territory. So your job is to always try to stay in the positive territory of knowing what is, what's not considered cringe, what is considered that it'll deliver a brand that looks really positive in a positive light, What also is, like, again, our job is, for me, like, my job right now, main focus is Vegas, and how do we highlight the properties? How do we highlight the experience of what you can, what can elevate your version of going to Vegas? We talk about, like, Universal or theme parks, that I know that world very well. That's kind of how I use a lot of my manuscript when I talk about a lot of things here, because the reality is, a lot of what theme park business is also transcended in something like the Vegas Strip, and how that transcends in building audiences around it. And basically you can see what works and doesn't work and work off that from that point on. So growing the understanding across digital space and also just physical space, because weirdly enough, my job is a lot to do with content, but activations and also physical products and stuff like that. So it is across a lot of pillars across things. It's not just vertical content. It's also even bigger than that from that space.
That's so good. I one of the things I've heard people talk about is just the importance of being in the channels and in the cultures. There's just nothing that can replace that, right? There's no process, but it's a lot about individuals too. I think hiring the right people, like, the best creatives are the ones that come with the best ideas, right? And so you got to make sure those people are, and so that's a lot of what I kind of got from what you said. Another thing that I think that I'm interested in hearing what you have to say is the importance of iteration and experimentation, right? The For You page for social has kind of changed the game when it comes to distribution and algorithm and things like that. How important is it for brands to be experimenting and iterating? Because I think they just want to find, like, what's the series we can create 100 of and then batch create it like a content factory, versus a team that is, like, agile and plugged in and thinking and trying this thing and trying that thing.
Discovery is important. Like, it's without a doubt the most number one important thing. Like, you have to make to see how it actually reacts to the audience. I think it's really, really important. Like, we've had a lot of discussions with YouTube, because, like, that's a really big minefield. So you have to kind of clear through that line of it all. But also just as a whole, like, you'll discover, hey, look, this is getting a lot more click through. We understand how that works, and we build off of that. I don't think shows are a thing. I think formats are a bigger conversation than ever. Like, I always say that to, like, it's nice to say the word show, but the reality is that's not really a function. I've had the Mr. Beast Hot Ones conversation for a million years now, where it's like, oh, I want the next Hot Ones, I want the next Mr. Beast, whatever the case may be. But the reality is, like, those things, we can't, again, like Mr. Beast took 10 years to be anywhere close to where Jimmy is now. Hot Ones was 3 seasons in before Hot Ones became where it is. And they figured out their audience. Like, the reality is, without finding that audience, like, you can't make the right pathway, and you can't make the right trek down that crossroads. So, like, without that and discovery is really important, but it's also tough because, like, I also prep, like, the good thing is Vegas understands that. They understand discovery. They understand we got to throw it out there and see what happens. It's not the end of the world if it doesn't work well this time around, but we'll figure out and reiterate and kind of find ways that, iterate how we expand what that works and how it doesn't work, and use the metrics to get us there. Analytics are really important. Studios on YouTube is really important. Any kind of back end on any of these programs are really important to just kind of see where habits are and fill that habit. Because at the end of the day, our jobs are to find the audience.
Yeah. You know what's funny about things like Hot Ones? I always tell people all the time, like, Hot Ones is just an interview show. Like, there's nothing special about what they did. Yeah. They found an interesting format to deliver an interview show. Yeah. I think about the Kevin Hart ice bath interview show that he did, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, it's just an interview. We've been doing this for a million years. I like to tell my team a lot of times, like, there's familiarity in content formats. Like, what are the content formats people know and love, and how do we iterate on that and come up with something original and unique to our brand and how we intersect with that? Right. That's what Hot One was. That's what I forget what the ice bath show was even called. Here's another one for you that I think you'd have an interesting take on. The world of content that we consume, right, is shaped by what is the best practice and how can we operationalize that best practice across everything, right? So everybody's online is saying, oh, the hook is the most important thing. 3 seconds, so you don't get their attention in the first three seconds, the rest of the video doesn't matter. And that is true, right? Like, that is 100% true. Or there's people that are like, you got to deliver your credibility. You got to say this. There's just so many frameworks and online courses that tell people how to create great content. I think about this even as the content I create, personally, right? For the agency. I wonder, at what point do you have to break the rules to be original? And I know there are some core rules, like, get people's attention to start, but that's not new to YouTube or to Instagram. No. That's been here forever. Yeah. There's rules about how do you keep their attention. Well, guess what? HGTV was keeping your attention between commercials by doing reveals at the end. Right. So, like, that's not new. I think in a lot of ways, content's getting commoditized by all the rules and best practices, and the best creators and the best brands are the ones that are going, no, I'm breaking that rule because I've got an original kind of way in. And I'm interested in your take on that all.
Look, I'm very hard on the whole, like, grab them off the front end video thing. But again, that rule has existed forever. You're correct on that. And the hook is really important. But the long game is the carrot on the stick, and how do you hold them on is really important for me in, like, kind of driving the overall across the content. It also comes down to recommendations in the digital space. Is kind of that, like, again, when I'm just, like, talking for YouTube for a second, but, like, retention time stuff's really important. Recommendations are really important. But the carrot on stick is part of that game. And that carrot on stick is basically have, like, a hook that kind of keeps the line going and dragging them till the end. Hot Ones, theoretically, when we reference that line, is good at the carrot on the stick. You know it already. It's the freaking, what's that? The hot sauce bottle that everyone, like,
I forget the name. Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying, right? Like, when you get to that freaking bottle, everyone knows, like, oh, they're going to get something's crazy going to happen. But they're going to basically, like, they're going to look at that moment and go, oh, okay, we know it. And the weirdest part is celebrities never know that. I don't no idea how that's the case. But after so many years. But anyway, like, that's a good carrot kind of moment. Like, everyone in the audience knows that, and they're hooked on that and held to it. They don't even expose that in the beginning of the video, which is the craziest part of it, because they're so used to having it now. People are trained. But, like, for my reality is, like, it definitely needs to be with any content we think about is, like, how are we holding them as long as possible? Yeah. Which is every video, anything you ever make is, like, how do you hold them as long as possible, right?
Well, dude, such a fun chat. I did want to just kind of close out and just say, in kind of doing some research about this this discussion and kind of talking to my team about it, we went across a bunch of stuff that you kind of said and talked about it. I just wanted to tell you that, like, your post where you talked about the importance of prioritizing family and your daughter was such a really cool comment.
Oh, thanks.
And I know that it was, I know we're here talking about social and content and hooks and brands and sure. But at the end of the day, like, I think a lot of people like you and I and people that have probably reported to us this becomes their whole life. And our identities become how we perform and how we deliver versus what is most important in our lives. I've got a 12-year-old daughter. I've got a 10-year-old son. When I left and started Maverick, it was part of prioritizing purpose and passion. And so it was really about, do I want to be that corporate person that I was on the pathway, or do I want more from life? And so when I see people that are doing cool shit, but also trying to find a way to rebalance when they get off kind of out of balance and spend, the time with things that matter most, I just wanted to say that was really cool. So I appreciate you sharing
Much
that.
appreciated, man. Yeah, man. Family first, buddy. That's I got down, but it's I was sucked into a job that basically I was doing the exact 24/7 workflow thing. My brain would not turn off. It's really hard to escape it sometimes. I get it. So but figuring out a way to get there and being able to balance it out is pretty key to, what's the point of doing all this, especially if you have family. So
100%. Yeah. Well, hey, not to end it on a little bit of a more emotional side, but that's me. And that's what we do here. So, dude, such a fun chat. Appreciate the time, all the learnings. I love kind of just hanging out and getting energy from like-minded people in the content space that are doing cool stuff. Congrats to your career. Congrats to what you and Bryce and the whole team are doing. I know there's a lot of people that are involved and keep kicking butt. You guys are setting a bar and helping people kind of see where they got to get to. So that's really cool. Appreciate the time today.
Appreciate it, buddy. Thanks, man. Great chat.